Part two.
Speak to this. There's recent examples of these kinds of appropriations, and as two of the major ones that I've identified have to do with the 2008 alleged banking bailout, the Affordable Care Act, but now which were explicitly mentioned in my previous efforts to address this, including on the Supreme Court level, but also. Now I understand it's demonstrated through the circumstances that surrounded what occurred with the bankruptcy of Enron and Arthur Andersen. Another one of the other considerations, specifically in regards to the relationship between mineral rights and between what determined to be a commodity available for sale or purchase, as well as what is allowed to be considered a valuation for determining what is acceptable as currency. That considerations regarding illegal coinage have to be taken into account, as at this time I do believe there is a form of illegal coinage that is a very prominent factor, and that this has to do with concepts of dispossession of people of their personal private property and property rights, specifically in regards to manners in which the basis for valuation in extension of public debt versus obligation in comparison with concepts of credit or creditability is to be met and is to be determined. There's the appearance of predicate acts involving the criminal conspiracy to undermine the solvency of the federal government is the primary object to be targeted in terms of determining not only culpability but the means and the methods by which this has been promulgated, and to identify the moments of willful engagement of cooperation with the criminal conspiracy. I believe the bill that was referenced in the motion to the Supreme Court, or in the request to the Supreme Court for articles of impeachment, is exactly that. It constitutes a form of contract to commit. And so the illegal debt put onto the people is evidencing of a perpetuation of these racketeering that is responsible for numerous crimes allowed to accrue and proliferate, or allowed to proliferate and accrue in severity due to abuse of sovereign immunity and failure to get effective constitutional fiscal policy implemented and followed up on. Some of the evidences of efforts that have not been attended to appropriately, and that I believe actually represents a form of predicate consideration for a criminal conspiracy, are on the refusal of Congress, which at best constitutes a form of willful negligence, and at worst demonstrates a willful agreement to commit the conspiracy regarding various kinds of central counterparty strategies, adherence to international compacts or refusal to adhere to international compacts such as Basel III and IV, specifically regarding disclosure on sources of funding. We are now more than a year overdue for implementation of that. Unverified swapping and abuse of substitute compliance, including as evidenced via the recent Department of State audit, and also certifications for national defense and other security matters intentionally mischaracterized as being about something else, that are allowed to be used in any sort of valuation or underwriting on securities or securitizable processes, i.e. the ascribement of CVE certifications that are supposed to be about cyber vulnerabilities, but without acknowledging the role that these certifications had in processes of either human test subject experimentation or observation of human responses to various kinds of cyber threats, and the manners in which human encounters regarding assessments on cyber threats was allowed to be mischaracterized as healthcare. This also then calls into specifically question around regarding the Affordable Care Act as a contract to commit to this criminal conspiracy. One of the things it does, going back to the CVE certification issue, is that it allows for a process of illegal underwriting for insurance and various insurance schemes via an abuse of the federal appropriations process, including for federally funded programs that effectively laundered personal private property that was illegally expropriated and permitted to be illicitly redistributed in unconstitutional manners, while people were compelled to perform debt and tax services that legally constitute peonage. This includes unpaid forced labor, including manual labor, oftentimes under the auspices of volunteering, i.e., providing some sort of in-kind service to another organization that is allowed to use that as some form of credit or some form of income in an abstract manner without actually compensating the person, and then obligating that person to perform in accordance with federal debt service, ostensibly because they are recipients of some sort of public welfare. This also includes sexual performance, including the manners in which the digital economy has been allowed to be availed of processes whereby human bioenergy is allowed to be harvested, including in people's rooms and including in connection with the rollout of 5G technologies, and including in ways that have allowed people to basically be used as coinage in the transference or transfer of assets connected to digital currency that is actually engaged with people in the processes of the unacknowledged digital economy. This includes also biological materials harvesting in terms of requiring people to meet certain benchmarks around provision of actual biological materials that are allowed to be used for research and development and or for other processes, calling into significant question the not only constitutionality, but other significant implications of the concept of the genetics bank and the genetics banking system that is not only domestic within the U.S., but is also something I understand is part of an international relationship the U.S. has with other countries, that also calls into question our priorities or the priorities of people setting policy regarding the harvesting of biological materials of Americans or people within the borders of the United States. And it also includes violations of faith and religious preference regarding healthcare and public education access, as well as concepts of usury and servitude, i.e., obligation to performance of contracts under certain terms that are implicit, not explicit, without availing people of the legal rights and the legal processes within which to engage a contract and also to discord, to cancel, or to otherwise resize oneself from a contract if it is determined that it was engaged under fraudulent pretenses or there are other aspects of the contract that violate even basic contract law. The intentional abuse of authority in refusal to perform the constitutional duties demonstrated by the members of the Senate, not only in reference to this bill, especially in regards to the fact that something of this importance was not even acknowledged with an actual vote, a roll call vote, which allowed for people to hold the individual senators accountable, but was allowed to be recorded via a voice vote that was identified as unanimous without any demonstrated dissent from anybody from within the Senate, hence puts a pallor on all of those whom those senators represent as Republican representatives, and leaves no recourse for attempting to address in a direct representative manner what are obviously breaches of the Constitution and an accrual of refusal to adhere to the Constitution in performance of their ministerial duties as representatives of the people that they represent. This also includes intentional relationships with accumulation of defaults regarding capital outlay responsibility for the federal budgeting process. If in fact this specific bill, which I contend it is being used in connection with other aspects of the federal appropriations process, including ones that have specific designations of policy and policy areas that are allowed to be promoted to the public and are made available for public discourse or for public discussion, but are meanwhile within and subsumed within a process where unanimous consent was allowed to be engaged in a fraudulent process of creating currencies based on whether or not certain policy issues would be allowed to be prioritized and acted upon in the moment explicitly and or leveraged with others that were connected to long-term capital outlays that were allowed to be defaulted on in the processes of this leveraging, that actually constitutes agreement to willingly conspire to engage defaults on responsibilities connected to the capital outlay process. This intentional deceit of the people into performing falsely defined obligations, especially connected to health care, rather than providing for domestic security, especially in regards to the rollout of the digital economy and the integration of technology into debt service, calls into questions very basic concepts of what is our ownership of our bodies, and hence how we are supported in exercising our constitutional rights to deal with other kinds of property rights. The processes of obstructing individual rights to ordinary political process, enticement and extortion into agreements to cooperate with illegal activity, including in manners that support the means by which to engage in high crimes, and covering up for demonstrated crimes in a criminal conspiracy while tampering with evidence, including official government documents, and committing fraud regarding bonds that obligate people to decades of debt service under fraudulent terms, including terms that attempt to cover up for the profundity of what is the letter of, by the letter of the law, sedition, through a mischaracterization of COVID-19 as being about health pandemic, take this to another level that is treasonable. The understanding is that when it comes to defining and arguing a case for treason, treason is not something that has demonstrable crimes and has demonstrable specific citations that need to be proven in a sort of formulaic manner. Treason involves a very high level of conspiracy, and the success or the ability to identify and argue a case for treason takes capacity to identify it, primarily of which is aiding and abetting the enemies of the United States in an effort to undermine the well-being and the constitutional rights of the people of the United States. There's about 6 minutes left. You don't deserve it.